The horror? The horror. What exactly is it about the horror that causes it to go largely ignored by major awards organizations? The horror genre for film has existed since its inception. Nosferatu, Psycho, The Exorcist, The Shining, The Blair Witch Project, Hereditary, Get Out, Son of the Mask. Okay, maybe not that last one, but it's still scary. A large amount of the most notable horror films in history have never received any, or at least very few, major awards. And most award shows don't even have horror as its own category when they have things like drama, musical, comedy, and animated films. I've been a fan of horror since I was but a young tween, after watching Paranormal Activity with my parents. Now I'm in college, studying media and entertainment. Film is what I want to do. I literally have a Saw tattoo, okay? I'm not kidding around. Recently, The Substance got nominated for Best Picture, making it only the seventh horror film in history to ever do so. I love this movie, and I wholeheartedly supported its nomination. However, knowing the Academy's track record with horror, I had a feeling that its glory would be short-lived. So I started to do some research, and the results are pretty unsurprising. Most awards organizations and critics suffer from something called genre bias. Genre bias is a phenomenon when a particular genre faces prejudice in favor of another. The Academy is pretty notorious about this, and they will be referenced heavily throughout this video as they're the most guilty of it. The three most common reasons this could be the case are present through most of my sources, which will all be linked in the description. The reliance on shock factor, stereotypes surrounding horror, and most importantly, elitism. Let's start with shock factor. The most common critique I hear about horror films is that they're overly reliant on shock value, like jump scares. They're cheap thrills that are essentially cheating to scare the audience. In an article for Film Updates, Matthew Minton states that the over-reliance of jump scares is a valid criticism. It's a tactic that's been in regular use since the slasher days of the 70s. Needless to say, it's been used a lot. However, it's all in good fun, and there's nothing wrong with letting yourself be subjected to it. I've even seen the argument that the build-up of tension wouldn't be nearly as effective without jump scares. You're waiting minutes upon minutes to see the mysterious thing in the shadows pop out and scare the shit out of you, only for nothing to happen. Unless it's a fake out, that's a pretty lackluster payoff. Horror is all about being unsettled, disturbed, scared, and even grossed out. It forces you to face those uncomfortable feelings in order to convey the message of the movie. Admittedly, a lot of horror films utilize things like violence, sex, and gore to the point of it being a crutch. But those movies are just for fun. I'm talking about the heavy hitters. Crimson Peak's plot would be a lot less significant without the incestuous relationship between Thomas and Lucille. Spoilers for the plot twist of a 10-year-old movie. The Substance's message about aging and being a woman in Hollywood wouldn't hit quite the same without all of the grotesque visuals to complement it. Let's face it, horror wouldn't be horror without these things. This brings us to stereotypes. Due to the perceived reliance of shock value, horror movies fall victim to stereotypes, and that they all follow the same generic formula. You can already picture it. A group of teens with suspiciously clear skin who all probably bullied me travel to a seemingly innocuous location. On the way, some random old man warns them of imminent danger at their destination. They chalk it up to him being senile and weird, and continue on. They arrive and think their vacation spot is a little creepy, but livable. Cue exposition, weird stuff happens here and there, a few of the teens engage in unprotected sex, which triggers the appearance of ex-monster or villain. Everyone dies, apart from the triumphant final girl / main character who kills said monster. Roll credits, hold for singer. Did you picture it? What I described was not only a lot of horror movies, but I was personally picturing Cabin in the Woods, which is actually about subverting those tropey stereotypes in horror movies. It was incredibly ahead of its time. These days, we're seeing the emergence of a subgenre of horror that explores deeper themes and promotes introspection in the effort to combat stereotypes, which has been named elevated horror. And there is a lot of discourse about this nomenclature because a lot of people think that horror has always had the capacity to be elevated. But examples like Midsommar, Hereditary, Get Out, Ari Aster and Jordan Peele have it figured out. And audiences and critics alike have responded really positively to these films. The glaring issue being that these films still got little to no gold to show for it. Horror has always been a vehicle of social commentary and themes. It's always been elevated. This brings us to the big boy. Elitism. Ah, yes. The real reason that horror gets such a bad name. Both shock factor and stereotypes tie into the juggernaut of the elitism practiced by film critics and award show organizations. Academy. William Paul, a professor of film and media studies at Washington University in St. Louis, wrote and published this book, Laughing, Screaming, Modern Hollywood Horror and Comedy. It goes in-depth about the scrutiny horror and comedy movies face, particularly gross-out horror and humor, and why critics and audiences alike feel like they're above it, and what could have caused that. It's a very interesting read, especially since I wasn't expecting to find a whole book on this topic when I was doing my research. One of the most interesting things about Laughing, Screaming is that it was published in 1994, 2 years before I was even born. Which just goes to show you how long this problem has been going on. This book from 30 years ago not only applies to the slasher flicks of the 70s and 80s, but to the films that get stubbed today. Film critics and voters within awards organizations tend to have a staunch view of what constitutes as good. Pulp and shock factor are only box office fodder meant to appease the masses. It obviously can't be used in a creative or subversive manner that would be considered award-worthy. That would be stupid. But that brings me to the Academy itself. The Oscars in particular have an egregious history with horror, but their bias could be by design. I found this article on Slashfilm by DeShawn Thomas that talks about the process of being accepted into the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. To receive membership, you have to be sponsored or approved by existing members, or even have an Oscar already yourself, oftentimes both. It's not a stretch of the imagination to believe that existing members are looking for others who share their views and opinions on films and not watching any of them. The Academy has been around for nearly 100 years, and in that time they've really heralded themselves as the arbiters of film. Despite their questionable decisions sometimes, their opinion ultimately matters, and can really shine a spotlight on a film and its team. Or take it away. Everyone's a critic, or so I hear. But they can also sway an audience to see a film or not, and that can really damage its success if it really deserves it. So, what can be done? What can we do? Who cares? The solution is both simple and complicated. We should try and hold awards organizations and critics accountable for their biases and convince them to view every film with an objective lens, especially because that's supposed to be their job. As simple as that sounds, it's the fact that this is a matter of opinion that makes it complicated. If you tell someone to change their mind or that their opinion is wrong, chances are they aren't going to hear you out. That being said, it feels as though that this demographic has really lost sight of the point of their jobs in favor of self-importance because their opinions have such a heavy influence on the industry. The point is to view and judge each film on a level playing field, noting its strengths, weaknesses, and most importantly, if it's entertaining. That's the point. To celebrate a truly innovative film that changes the way we view things. Of course, not all of them are good. Sometimes they're even supposed to be stupid and contrived. They're supposed to be fun. Even if they're sad, or scary, or funny. Just because a film has these things, that doesn't disqualify it from deserving awards. Okay. I suppose this is all a long-winded way of saying that the substance got robbed. Do you mind? In all seriousness, I think the film industry as a whole should really consider breaking down the biases and just appreciating the art form. We're already starting to see some meaningful changes, if only slightly. Critics are starting to really come around to horror, and I think awards organizations should do the same. And they kind of are, a little bit. As of recording this, the Academy announced that, going forward, members who wish to have a final say on the votes for the Academy Awards need to have seen all nominated films, which is great. But the fact that that wasn't a requirement before now is kind of freaking insane to me. But it's a step in the right direction. And if we keep it up, we could really start to see the films that we think deserve the recognition and the flowers get that. And it all starts with us and with them. I'm looking at you, Academy. Unless you're too scared.